Hi everyone, welcome back to Joy in Dementia. I know it's been quite a long time since I have posted a YouTube video, and I want you to know that I find it really important that I only post videos when I have content that I'm really excited about. And I've also been working on a couple new projects, which I'll share more about in my next video. But I have a really great free guide for you on my website, and I'll leave a link to that down below. It's all about the dementia stages. So if you have any questions about what the early stage looks like, the mid-stage dementia or late-stage dementia looks like, you can definitely check that out for free below. And also checking me out on Instagram if you're active there. I check in there a lot more often than YouTube. So I hope to see you there as part of my community. And today I am so glad to introduce my new friend, Emerson Lee. They go by the pronouns they and them. And Emerson is the founder of Happy Memories Elder Support. It's a private practice where they enrich the lives of elders and their caregivers by fostering joy, peace, and connection. So Emerson's practice is based in Arizona and Washington State. And they also offer a ton of virtual services, and we'll probably touch on a couple of those at the end of the interview. Emerson is a certified dementia practitioner with experience as an end-of-life doula, and they have experience as a life enrichment activity provider to over 100 elders. Emerson, welcome to Joy in Dementia. It's great to have you here.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I am so excited to talk about your personal experience with dementia, your professional experience with dementia, and of course, recommendations that you have for how to create meaningful moments during this time. And as we're taping, this is in December. And so we are going to use examples that are holiday specific. However, we can definitely apply these to non-holiday times as well. And I'm sure you'll cover that for us, Emerson. So first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise? I mentioned that you're a certified dementia practitioner, of which I am as well. And I think you are also CMDCP, so Montessori. So if you can talk about that a little bit, I really stress to my audience how important credentials are, because it shows an indication of training and how specialized we are. So go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. So like you said, I'm a certified dementia practitioner. I'm trained as an end-of-life doula with ALUA Arthur's Going with Grace training program. And then I did get the certified Montessori dementia care professional, as well as becoming a certified caregiver. So that's kind of my packet of resources or credentials. And then, like you had mentioned, my experience comes from being a life enrichment provider. So a handful of different elements.
I love that. And if I can just jump in and ask you, what does an end-of-life doula do?
Yeah, so an end-of-life doula is basically like, if people are familiar with birth doulas, that's someone who's walking through the process of birth, where there's expected physical and emotional and logistical challenges you might experience. And we're doing the same thing with death, because death also has stages and also has a process where there's things that you might not realize. And as doulas, we're trained to, have those different elements of the logistical, emotional, legal, some medical. We are non-medical providers, but we advocate with medical people. So yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. A lot of people don't know who we are or what we do.
Sure. So that is a really cool aspect to what you bring to your company, Happy Memories Elder Support. And can you talk a little bit about what a life enrichment director does and where they work?
Yeah, so life enrichment professionals are usually in long-term care settings, which is where I was working. And it's interesting because it can mean various different things. Sometimes it just means they're the activity director. But in my specific case, I was technically like an activity assistant, but it was basically a one-on-one support provider. So instead of just being the activity assistant who's like, here's the markers, it was, I'm going to go hang out with the people who aren't doing this activity, and maybe they're having a really bad day, or maybe they just moved in, or maybe they're just not capable of doing a project with a group, and so they're getting overlooked in the activity schedule. And so I was on the front lines of anyone who was, having trouble, having a bad time, and really got to know them and love spending time with them.
Yes. And while we're into this, I know you mentioned that you were given the assignment to look in each person's file to see, to learn more about them. So can you talk a little bit about that?
It's the start of everything with my business, with my core like foundational offering, which we will talk about later. But basically, I was asked to look in these care plans, and anyone who's seen them before, you scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and it starts with all the medical conditions and medical treatments and all this stuff that an activity professional, someone looking at their whole being and their well-being, that's not necessarily relevant to us. I didn't need to know what their conditions or their medications were. I needed to know, what music do you absolutely love, like specific songs, and that's never in there. And so I did a lot of sifting through care plans, conversations with families, just interactions with people, seeing what was on their wall. Like, I was on a treasure hunt. And it took a lot of effort. And so basically the things that I've created are trying to take the effort out of it and bring those things up to the top of the care plan and having a specifically psychosocial emotional care plan.
I love that, because our parents with dementia are more than their dementia, more than what their medical issues are. And that's one way I think that Emerson and I really connect. It's like we want the healthcare system, especially with the services that we provide, to be way warmer, way more community based, not medical and cold. I think that that's really a shortcoming of the healthcare industry, and so we're doing that sort of in our own ways. But I love that we align, and that's why I brought Emerson here. And do you have personal experience with dementia, and how did that lead you to what you're doing now?
The best way I can describe it is that I got to know my uncle, and it's a really interesting thing, and I won't go into it too much, but basically, like, my mental health journey has always coincided with my experience with dementia, and I had really bad seasonal depression. So I went to go live with my aunt and uncle in California. And that was the beginning of everything, was that I just happened to be coming to stay in California. He just happened to have dementia, and I was helping out. And I didn't know what to expect. I thought that there would be no joy. There would be no, pleasant moments. It would just be bad. And we would play games, and the rules would be completely made up. And we'd and he would say stuff that like didn't make sense, but he was so happy. And I'd be like, yeah, definitely. And we just had all these beautiful moments. This is fun. Like, I enjoy spending time with him. And I remember him going on walks with me and my dogs, and just so many of the kinds of things I try to bring into people's lives now. It all started back then, and that was, I think, almost 10 years ago now. So it's been a long journey, but that is where the personal experience started.
I love that so much. And so you saw that the importance of making those moments, and that's really what brought you to create your business and what we're going to talk about today. So going into that, you have something called micro delights. So can you talk about what those are? How do we do them? How are they powerful compared to other activities?
Yeah. So in the world of dementia care, which and many of your clients and viewers will probably know, is we see a lot of the traditional activity schedule, and we see a lot of, they need to exercise and they need to have classes and all this stuff that's really hard to bring into their lives a lot of times. And micro delights are just the moments. Like, it's just, maybe someone's not doing the whole art class with us, but I go over and I turn on the speaker and play their favorite music, and I see them sitting there mouthing the words. Or maybe I put a magazine of a subject they really, really like into their hands. And there are these things that, corporate activity schedules, they don't recognize that. They don't think about, like, we need to get all of them their coffee exactly how they like it in the morning. You can have hundreds of them a day instead of just, 5 activities that aren't really easy to do. And in my experience in long-term care setting, our activity schedule never happened. But micro delights, when I was there, I was on top of them.
And I love that, because it's so, I think we plan things out so much, and it can cause, I know for me with my dad, the more I planned things that I wanted to do, the more stressed out he got. And I found out that as the dementia progressed, it was better to just do like maybe one activity a day. And that pleased him, And so I think that we still have a ways to go in these long-term settings of really trying to create those moments instead of trying to get the schedule done, because we are in their world. Yeah.
I actually really appreciate that you brought that up, because that's something I was reflecting on recently. I recently got diagnosed with ADHD, And I realized that the micro delights work for my brain really well in the same way it works for people with dementia. Is like, I can't tell you in a day what I'm going to do for the next 8 hours. I don't know what each, I can plan, I have the best of intentions every day, and it doesn't happen. And it's the same thing with dementia. You just have to go with it. And when you have a strict schedule, that's not going to go well. But if you're just doing micro delight by micro delight, however they come up and whenever they come up, that's so much more doable.
Yeah. And I love that it's spontaneous too, because we know that people with dementia are unable to know, have a concept of time of like what's going to happen in the next half hour, right? It's really just the people around them that are pushing them around doing the schedule. What I mean?
It's not working for them, and you can see it not working for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, this doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. So what are a couple examples of micro delights that we could use maybe during this holiday season or even outside of the holiday season?
Yeah. So one of the classic ones I always mention is coffee, because coffee is such a familiar routine and ritual for so many people. And a lot of times as people get older, they can't have caffeine, or they need thickened liquids or something. And it can be accommodated to all of that. You can have decaf, you can have it just in the morning. I've given thickened coffee to someone and he loved it. So it's something as simple as that. And then for the holidays, it's just full of them. It's like the hot chocolate I had with my uncle. It's, decorating the cookies, and they can be as messy as they need to be, eating as many cookies as they want. And then music is so huge. I think a lot of times we think music has to be, you sit down for an hour-long class where they're playing instruments or whatever. But it can also just be that you turn the speaker on while they're in the living room and they really enjoy it, or you have a dance party with them. And even if they're in a wheelchair, you just kind of like dance around a bit. So it's full of them. And once you start seeing them and building them, they just grow and grow.
So you sort of have categories of these micro delights. So you mentioned coffee, you mentioned hot chocolate. Is that like maybe a favorite food, maybe a favorite drink? Okay.
Yeah. So I call them landmarks because as we'll talk about, I'm sure there's the mini map and the happy map. And so going with the theme of a map, the landmarks are, if you ask someone, like, where is your joy? How do I find your joy? The landmarks are what we look for. So for me, the big ones I work with is music, nature, food. These are things that are so important in our lives, and especially lives of people with dementia, and so often overlooked. So they are these big categories that are, they're really helpful to be able to look at those different groups and then break them down into the specifics.
I think you had an example of maybe like a coffee or hot chocolate type favorite thing that you had in your experience.
Yeah. So a gentleman named Johnny, which I point out is a fake name, protecting his identity, but a gentleman named Johnny, he had a lot of falls. And so he would often try to get up from his wheelchair and fall. And that really scared him. And so he would often scream, help me, someone please help me. And we could not tell if he was on the ground having had a fall or if he was just scared. And it was about 50-50, especially towards the end of his life. And so you always had to check on him, of course, no matter what.
Yep.
So it was really a matter of preventing him from having that panicked moment where he was calling out like that. And I found that if I didn't have time to come sit with him, I could give him a can of Coke, and just putting that can in his hand and having him have something to hold on to, something that had been given to him by someone he trusted, and cracking it open so he could just sip it, he would be quiet and happy and at peace for those, however long it took, sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes. But it was that peace, that company in a can is what I call it. And that allowed us to go about our days taking care of everyone else, knowing that at least at that moment he was okay.
Yeah. And how did you decide on Coke? Did you have a conversation with him, or is that just kind of your go-to because of this generation?
So there's a little bit of both. Like there's residents who I knew that they had Coke every day of their life, or Diet Coke. It was half and half what they preferred. But some of them, it was like, this is something you love. One gentleman, he had a Coke every day of his life, and he would chug it and then have a huge burp, and that was just part of his day then. So that was specific to that gentleman. With Johnny, it wasn't specific because it actually, there's a set of micro delights that I find are relevant to almost everyone. I found that of the residents I worked with, probably 95% of them like Coca-Cola. They like chocolate chip cookies. They like to go outside, feel the sun, go for a walk, even if they're in a wheelchair and being, pushed. kids, dogs. There's these go-tos that almost everyone enjoys. And so if you know your loved one likes Coke, give them Coke. If you don't know if they do, try it out, and they very well might like it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And you also don't know if they're getting Coke from the staff either. You know what I mean? Because I think that elders with dementia, I think it gets to a certain point where you need to think about, do I want to care about their health or do I want to care about their quality of life? You know? And with my dad, he had such a sweet tooth. And I kind of wonder going back, well, what if we had just done everything healthy? I don't know if he would have lived a fulfilling life, you know? And so the fact that Coke can sort of be that fulfillment is really cool. And so that's kind of favorite drink, favorite food. I think we mentioned the music. So do you have an example of that, how that worked really well?
Yeah, so music was huge. And something I know we've talked about before is people think, oh, they like music. And that's great. People with dementia often do like music, but we want to know the specific music that they love. And so in my conversations with family, I was often able to find out they know every word of Bob Dylan songs, or they know, oh my gosh, every single one of them has different people. But Frank Sinatra was popular. There's a bunch of them that I wouldn't have played them. I probably played Frank Sinatra. I probably wouldn't have played Bob Dylan. That wouldn't have been on my radar. And so that was very common. The Bob Dylan example is one of my biggest ones because I actually played the song for her in her final moments of life. And that was something she and I would sit and she would mouth all the words, even though she couldn't hold the conversation anymore. And you could tell that she was taking that in even as she was dying, having this very familiar voice playing in her ear. And that's something that's really prevalent for the holidays too, because holiday songs are so built into our brain. And you can get someone singing along to, like, we'd play them sometimes in the middle of the year because people would just want to be singing along to holiday songs. So there's a lot we can do with music.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of long-term homes that play music that they assume people will like they'll play the Frank Sinatra, but that's kind of putting everyone in the same box. I think people like that tailored approach. So I think you mentioned, and when we were talking earlier, maybe possibly creating a playlist, like the long distance daughters, that's something that we can do to benefit our forgetful parents. In memory care, or even if they're living at home, but just really having that personal touch if you know what they like. I know for my dad, I sort of had a go-to song if I wanted to help him with the shower where he got really, upset and embarrassed and all of that stuff that would relax him. And then there were songs that would motivate him to do something with me, like the Beach Boys, right? So I think that the playlist is so important.
Yeah, that's actually one of my number one recommendations for everyone of any age ever, is to make a playlist of those very specific songs, and particularly songs between the ages of 10 and 30 have the strongest prevalence in our brains. But the playlist is huge, especially if you're able to if you can afford a smart speaker, which these days you can get them for like between $20 and $60. And if you can encourage caregivers to say, play mom's playlist, then even if they're just sitting in their room looking out the window, they have that music playing. And so the speaker and playlist are like the two things that I'm like, please get one for your loved one. And you can do it from anywhere. One of my most beautiful stories from COVID was that a daughter in London created a very long, beautiful playlist for her dad here in the States, and he would just sit and sing along. You'd walk past his door and he'd be singing, Bill Withers, Don't Worry, Be Happy. I think, is that Bill Withers or is that?
Yeah. I think it is.
Yeah. But all those, classic songs that we weren't necessarily playing those songs.
Right.
So it was pretty powerful.
I love that. And then I think you mentioned, what was your thing? Oh, nature. So, you have this great idea, which we've talked about this, that the go-to idea is like photo albums, which can be great and all, but that could cause some challenges, which maybe you can address. But you have a really good idea about how to incorporate nature, and it's really easy. So please share.
Yeah. So the photo album is, like you said, the go-to usually, but it requires memory. It's long-term memory. So many of them remember, but it's still explicit memory of names, faces, stories. And a lot of people don't have that. And so any gap that they have is going to be distressing often to both parties. And so one of my go-to recommendations, I have a handful of them. One of them is a hummingbird feeder. And a hummingbird feeder is just like so simple. And if you can get one put up where your loved one can see it, it brings so much joy. And it's something I mentioned to my grandma, and she has some mild cognitive impairment, and she called me a few weeks later. I just have this is the best idea that you could put a hummingbird feeder out, and it's like having a little pet. And you could just tell how much it connected with her and how much she held on to that and remembered it. And that's what I've seen in other people too, is it's something that it really sticks with them, is having this little pet.
I love that. And the fact that, because not everyone, depending on where the memory care is that they're in, they can't have a pet. My dad wasn't able to have a pet. So I would sneak in my cat sometimes.
I highly recommend that.
And people would hear the meowing and be like, what is that? But it would be residents, and they'd be so happy to, just hear or see a cat. So it's like anything we can do. And I love the hummingbird feeder idea, because not only does it take the pressure off the person with dementia to sort of point out pictures, because I think we as daughters are so used to being like, oh, I wonder if my mom, remembers this thing that happened, and we sort of look at them expectantly, even though we don't realize it, and people with dementia feel that pressure. So I love this, because no one needs to do anything for them. All you have to do is put up a hummingbird feeder, and then as long as the hummingbirds are there, they're entertaining them. And I love this idea too for those of us who have parents that live at home. And, our caregiving parent is super overwhelmed, has to do all the things around the house. And this is just a wonderful way to bring peace to someone with dementia, and also have it be so easy.
And that's the whole point, is the ease of it, that it's easy for the person with dementia to connect with it. It's easy for the people around them to bring it to them. It's so much more accessible than, the strict kind of schedule that says you have to do all this with all these materials and do them in this order. And, you can shorten that from being a huge process to just like this tiny moment.
So essentially the micro delights are what we just covered. And so examples, landmarks of those would be what was the first one we talked about? The favorite drink or favorite food. Then we have the music. Then we have nature. And I think you wanted to talk about one more thing.
Yes, the kinds of things we can bring to someone for comfort. And the best example I have right now of prized possession is my partner actually made a beautiful crochet blanket for my grandma, and she loved it when she got it. And she always mentioned it, and she had it on her bed. But then just about 2 months ago, she went from being completely independent to being in the hospital with a serious medical thing, and then ended up getting assessed with cognitive impairment while she was there. So her life changed completely overnight. And as soon as I knew she was in the hospital, I called my dad and I was like, you need to get her blanket. You need to go to her apartment, get her blanket. I'm a professional, and my professional opinion is get the blanket. And he was like, ugh, she's fine. It's comfortable. It's really nice here at this hospital. And I was like, it is still a hospital. And so he did get the blanket, and he's taken really, really beautiful care of her. Good. He got the blanket, and she held on to that for her entire journey through the hospital and skilled nursing. She told everyone about it who came into the room. It was this huge source of comfort for her. And it's just a blanket. It's just the simplest thing that we would think, oh yeah, sure, maybe it would help. And then it's actually the number one thing in her life for those weeks as far as items.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think similar with stuffed animals, there's controversy around that, but I am all for stuffed animals if that creates that meaningful moment for them,
Yeah.
And I think it not only brings back sort of the routine or something familiar for them, but I know that when I'm in the hospital, I like to bring something too, you know what I mean? Because it's very stressful, especially for people with dementia. They, again, don't have a concept of what happened in the past or what's happened in the future. So all they know is that they're in a place that feels completely different to anything and definitely does not feel like home, So this is a nice way to create that peace and love in where they are at that moment and however long they want to hold the blanket, right?
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the animals thing because two other elements of her time in the hospital. One, we play classical music for her every night, and the only night she complains about is the night that she didn't have that playing. So that's one of the micro delights. But then the stuffed animal, I did not think she was at a point where she would appreciate a stuffed animal. I didn't bring one to her, but her cousin had just gotten one of the Joy for All animatronic dogs. And I thought to myself, my grandma's not really into animals. She's never really been a dog person or anything. But lo and behold, this is one of just the sweetest things that came out of this. When she was 6 years old, she was in the hospital, and it was really scary for her, but she had this little stuffed dog. And so
Wow.
at the end of her life, at 90 years old, her cousin, I don't think her cousin knew this either, her cousin gives her this dog while she's in the hospital, and it gave her the same comfort. Like, she just felt so supported and loved. And it's so funny because the animatronic dogs are really, really popular. I've used them. People love them. They either think they're real and that they're super cute, or they know they're not real and they think they're super cute. But Momo had this really interesting experience with it where she knew it wasn't real, but she talked to it as if it was and interacted. So she'd say things like, "Oh, it's funny, you're not real, but oh, you're just so cute. And oh, can you be quiet now? You're being a little loud." And just this very beautiful marriage of like knowing it's not real, but still being deeply comforted by it.
I love that so much. And that's why I think try anything, because you don't, how would you know that when she was 6 years old, she got a stuffed puppy? And that's the thing, people might not even remember that because they have dementia, right? But it'll come back to them and be like, oh, there's some familiar thing about this, and I find comfort from this. This is positive feelings. So yeah, definitely I would say try anything,
And that's what a lot of my time in memory care was, is just like throwing anything that I possibly could at people and seeing what sticks. And of course, not physically throwing but just like trying the music, the food, the nature, just anything. And I would literally go, like, for my first day in memory care, I'd go and I'd write on a piece of paper in the staff room. I called it my happy list. And it was just like, here's what worked. And that's what evolved into happy maps, because you need to have them written down. You need to know.
Yes. Yes. So before we go into happy maps, I just wanted to ask I think we have some really great recommendations for the landmarks of the micro delights. And so if you had to sum up this interview to one takeaway point for long distance daughters, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of children of people with dementia worry a lot about the activities and the traditional, structured, rigid things we can bring into life, which can have a lot of value. But I think that the most accessible thing we can do for them is create as many meaningful moments as we can, to bring as much of their selfhood into these moments of what are these things that they love. And they can be things that last for 2 seconds, or they can be things that last for hours. I've seen people sit with a cowboy magazine for hours. So building those things in.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, so I think definitely during the holidays, if you're visiting your parents, I think it's easier to create those little moments, micro delights. And is there a way, I know you mentioned the daughter in London who sent the playlist. So there are ways that you can create those things from a distance as well that your parents can benefit from.
Yes. So micro delights are super adaptable to, oh my gosh, I just love them. They're adaptable to any cognitive stage, to any mobility level, to just so many different things. And one of the things is distance. And so you can obviously be doing them if you're in the same house or in person with them. But some of the examples I give that micro delights can travel is playlists, care packages, food delivery. Obviously, we think a lot about phone and video calls, but we can get creative with them. We can have our kids say hello, or just, my grandma just likes to hear the kids. They don't really talk to her very well because they're too young, but just hearing the kids laughing. And there's so many things we can do from far away that still bring a huge amount of joy.
Absolutely. And I think one other thing to just point out too, that we kind of forget because we're trying to keep our forgetful parent happy and all of those things during these micro delights and these landmarks, we share that moment with our parents too. And that's where my best memories are with my dad. It wasn't during really like a structured activity. It was sort of those spontaneous moments that we shared. because I felt that love and connection in just those seconds, even though he couldn't speak anymore, but we could still share it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've actually started referring to them as is like, my official term is micro delights, but I also call them micro connections because they are these little connections we're having throughout the day. And when I think about residents I've worked with, I felt very deeply connected with them. And it was from a series of hundreds or thousands of micro connections. So they do build this, really strong bond between people. And especially if it's a loved one where you're feeling the bond is diminishing, there are ways to kind of reconnect. And it doesn't have to be verbal. It doesn't have to be your name or a specific memory. It's just like connections in the moment.
Yes. And I'm so glad you said that, because I think our caregiving parents get so, because they still have a structured life, right? And so they're trying to get the forgetful parent to be in this structured life and do this activity and go to this class, whether it's, an adult day center or like maybe a music class or things like that on Zoom. And they're upset that they weren't able to get the forgetful parent to those classes. But I love what you say.
Yeah. Well, my barometer has always been like, are they expressing joy? And those are things we can see in smiles, laughter. A lot of times people will just be like, thank you so much. They'll express it. They'll say, wow. I love when they say, wow. There's so many ways people express it. And so if you're hearing those expressions, if you're able to elicit those, to me, that's the best possible measure of it. There's many more complicated ways to measure quality of life, but they're often based in, kind of ableism of, trying to measure someone's quality of life based on what they're still able to do. And to me, I just break it down to like, are they still experiencing joy?
Yes. And so if they are, if you're having milkshakes together and dancing, then your job is done.
Then your job is done. Yeah, you're doing great. Especially, as an end-of-life doula, I think of dementia it is a terminal illness. And so when we are experiencing terminal illness, have at it. Like, have a blast. Have as much life in your moments as you can. And dementia is this interesting experience where you may have years of that. And you may have this really long journey with them. And so if we focus on building as many moments as we can, then it might be a really beautiful journey instead of just a really sad one.
Yes. And I'm so glad you said that, because I had a thought that I wanted to share that, and you may have mentioned this a little bit, but I love that it applies no matter what dementia stage they're in, because then that doesn't cause us stress to be like, oh, we can't do that activity anymore. And that's really upsetting to us. And it also connects all of those moments together and is consistent for your forgetful parent. So I think there's some value in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. The variation between cognitive stages is fascinating to me, because there are people who they're not experiencing a lot of micro delights, but they're peaceful, especially the later stages. I think sometimes we think their life isn't meaningful because they're not expressing a lot, but sometimes that's just the stage that they're in. But we can still find some of those moments. And so some of my favorite moments were someone who's in a really late stage experience of dementia, when they're not interacting very much, but they see a dog and their eyes light up and they smile for the first time in maybe weeks. And having, whether it's a song or a lot of times someone is on a pureed diet at that point, but you can get them ice cream or something like that. That's just really joyful. And so it is harder in the later stages, but we can still build them in. And that can be even more beautiful because it's so much harder to connect at that point.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I would love if you could share what you're currently offering on your website for free. It is talking a little bit about the maps, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I have what's called the mini map, and the mini map is just kind of the first taste of micro delights. It's a way of articulating, identifying for yourself some of these landmarks. There's 3 of them on there, and it's I wish I had grabbed it. It's over there, but it's a piece of paper that you can cut into 4, and you have 1 copy for yourself and 3 copies for loved ones. And so you might want to share them with, I'll probably share them with my partner, my dad, and my best friend. And it's helpful for you to do it if you don't have cognitive impairment and use it for self-care and have it set aside for the future. But then, of course, we can do them for our loved one as well. And so that is on my website. You can sign up for that and get it, and you can fill it out. I try to encourage people. I'm like, it can take 5 minutes, that's all. And it can change your life. It can get you oriented towards this approach and building them into your life and your days.
Absolutely. I was looking over because I have it under a bunch of boxes, but I won't take the time to get it. I did already fill it out. So I'm
actually, I have my copy. I forgot I have my copy right next to me. Yeah. So this is the mini map. So I keep this right next to me. I've been working way too much and I don't have a lot of time to build in long self-care. I'm not getting massages or taking long baths, but I have this here as a reminder and I've been reorienting myself to that.
Awesome. I love it. So yes, definitely check out Emerson's website where you can get that free mini map. And that'll be at makinghappymemories.com, which I'll put in the description below for you. And that's just, you kind of said this, but that's just a little preview to the happy map that you're offering, which really gives a lot more landmark examples, even more than we covered here.
Yeah, the happy map, that's what this whole journey has been about. And so that's definitely something I want on people's radar because the mini map has power, but the happy map is super powered and there's so much more to it. And it's, I think when people hear that it's a guide, they think it might be multiple pages long. It's literally just one page. It's one personalized portable page. You can frame it or laminate it. It can, like if Momo had one at the time, she's going to be the inaugural one. I'm going to make it with her this week. But if she had it, we would have had that framed or laminated to have next to her bed in the hospital, to have next to her bed in skilled nursing, and now with assisted living and caregivers in the home. And so it's something that's very readily available so that anybody on their care team can see it and refer to it to be building these moments in.
Absolutely. I love that. And, I wish I had that with my dad actually, because in the hospital, I would find this little piece, on the board where they write all the things to the different nurses. I would write like a little box that says his favorite is vanilla pudding, or I would create this. I created this paper that said, "Hi, I'm John, and this is what I like," for his memory care. But I love how this is just. Everything is together. I think one of the other things too is that you won't constantly, or your caregiving parent won't constantly be asked the same thing because they'll have access to this reference.
Yeah. And you can, part of the cost of the happy map is you have unlimited copies. You can print out 500 if you want to and get them to everyone in their life, everyone on the care team. Because like you said, people who are caregiving for their loved one are trying to express so much of this to the other parts of the care team, and it is so often disregarded. Yes, and that was one of the, people think working memory care was painful and heartbreaking. It wasn't with the residents. What was painful and heartbreaking was seeing things like loved ones trying to get this to their loved one, and no one delivers the care package, or someone throws away the note that has really important information. That was the most devastating part of it to me, was that the potential was there, but it wasn't being actualized. And so the happy map, the goal is to make it very actualized. You threw away the happy map. Well, here's another copy.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emerson, for chatting with me today and sharing with my viewers what your business is all about. I know that you're just really starting to get your offerings going, and I'm really excited. So I love to help you with that and share you with people.
And I really appreciate you for giving me the space to talk about it, because as you know, we can geek out about this all day, and just having someone I can talk to about it is very, very exciting to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining me, and I will be back in a little bit, maybe in a couple of weeks, to tell you what I have coming up for Befriended Heart. It's all the things that I've been working on since I haven't been doing interviews on YouTube this year, and I'm really excited to share those with you. So I will see you next time. Bye.